This little talk's called Bringing the Olympics to Life, and I want to answer the question, why am I doing it at the Autodesk booth? So, the introduction. I'm Mark Rowley, I'm Technical Director down at SEGA Studios Australia. We've been around for a while. We used to be known as the Creative Assembly, but we rebranded last year. The guys have been busy beavering away, trying to finish the London 2012 official video game of the Olympic Games. So, there's a couple of questions. So, when we started the project, it's what's important about the game. What are people going to get from the experience? What is the Olympics? So it is a global event. It doesn't matter where you come from. Everybody knows what the Olympics is, and they all share pretty much a similar way of experience it. It's diverse. There's a whole lot of content. So there are hundreds of events we could be doing, but we focus on what's important, what's exciting, what's going to make a good game. And how do people experience the Olympics? Well, most people are going to experience it through their TV. So a TV-style presentation is important. So if you're going to do TV-style presentation, obviously realism is important. You want your characters, you want your venues to be as believable as possible, and that's not an easy trick, as most people know. So, just give you a quick preview of it. It goes up. It's probably not going to happen that we really will take first, but you know. So, okay, so I'm going to go through the products we use, because the reason I'm here is we used a lot of Autodesk products to get where we needed to be. So I'll start off with Scaleform. So I'll assume nobody knows anything, and you know Flash. You've seen websites. You've seen that kind of very easy GUI, lots of motion movement. That's the kind of stuff that you really want your front ends, you want your little widgets and UI elements to use. So we used it entirely for our front end process. And obviously, it's something that was intuitive for our graphic artists. We had Flash programmers who primarily used to work in web design, but now they're able to put that experience into games. And then Scaleform allowed us to get that easily into the runtime. So we kept them in a working environment that was good for them, so they can iterate their content properly. We also used, you saw these from the video, so like little component elements, so little movie clips, little bits of Flash, which when they're used actually in the game allows us to add all of the dynamic content we do and drive that from the runtime. So scoreboards, flags, lead times. You play multiplayer, you've got different number of competitors in there. So having that flexibility just allowed them to concentrate on it as this is a single element. I'll make that look gorgeous. I'll put all of the little animations and bells and whistles on it, and then the coders can just hook it right up. It's pretty straightforward, and that's it. Beast. Now, we used Beast quite extensively. So obviously static lighting. So our artists used Ernst here to kind of get a really quick view of a global illumination model. So they could quickly tweak and change lights. Our runtime lighting system was quite compressed, so we wanted to bake as much into the environment as possible and use our freedom around the characters, but you still want that depth in your stadium. You still want it to look fantastic. So they had a real good turnaround, just being able to get a a really fast approximation of what the lighting was going to be. And then using DistriBeast and a lot of nodes in there, they could bake higher fidelity light maps. We also had a way of separating the environment team and the rest of live development so that they could build these light maps offline and then inject them once they're built straight into the build pipeline. So there's no waiting for people. They can kind of work together. Yeah, carry on. So just a few. It's not going to go. Ah. Hang on, I think my laptop's having a heart attack. It'll get there, though. There we go. So just to kind of give you the kind of view of the stadiums, I mean, the Olympic Stadium is huge, and it wasn't actually built at that time. So we were building everything from blueprints and estimating what that was going to be. These renders and the fly-throughs actually came out and then went back, and the guys used that as previews for what those venues were actually going to look like afterwards. But you can see we really used the lighting to good effect, so you get the crowd within shadows, and England's not going to be that sunny when the Olympics is on. And then, in contrast, we've got another video that won't play. So, even while it's stalling and trying to wake up, you can see there's a completely different feel to it. So, you know, we've got the God rays coming through. We've got that whole different set of lighting. We still managed to preserve the darkness at the background, keep the players focused on the main environment, but give that sense of scale that's in the Olympic venues. And then the next one was character lighting. So we only had one shadow casting light throughout the entire game. That's generally matched up to the same direction as the highest ambient light we used for Beast, but we took liberties with it to compose shots for that TV style presentation. I mean, even if you're used to film, you know, you have your reflectors, you have your lights, you make the lighting shot work for you. And we cheated exactly the same. So we used lots of fill lights to create fake scatter and bounce. We placed these nodes, and we used them to generate spherical harmonic information that we then used in our character shader. So we can get a lot of depth on the characters themselves. And we're going to go into the character stuff next. So you can see some pictures there. That's the kind of framing and presentation you'd expect from TV. You'd expect them to get the close-ups. So, of course, you need to get depth on them. So the archer guy down at the bottom, you can see he's got quite a lot of definition in his skin. The spherical harmonic lighting helps you pick up all of that definition. And the same with the guys at the top. They fit in the scene, but we've definitely played with the runtime lights there to make it look more composed. And we've changed that shot by shot. So 3ds Max. This is where probably the bulk of our work was done, to be honest. So let's put it in perspective. We've got over 40 events in the game. We've got over 30 nations. We've got multiple competitors per nation. And from a logistics point of view, that's a lot of athletes we've got to create. So we didn't have runtime morph technology, and we didn't have the time to do it. So we had to come up with a clever way to get that amount of content and variation into the game and make it look good. So what we did was we needed to create a way to create characters from components, basically, Lego characters. But then we wanted to bake that down to a runtime format that was optimal for the platforms and give ourselves the kind of control we needed to still tweak all of that and put it in the artist's hands. And it was putting it in the artist's hands that was really the important thing. So we've got completely different body and rig types. So you can see, you know, we've got a short vault female, we've got the male tall runner, we've got the field event guy. They've got different physiques, different bodies. We had motion capture for all of the different types of events, but we still needed to find a way to get that data through our pipeline in a similar way. So we've also got items, clothing, accessories, the things that go onto the characters. and we had a limited amount of time to create the head variations. So what most people, and I've seen done in other titles, is runtime morph. But we didn't have the ability to do that at that stage. But what we did have the ability to do was morph a multiple set of heads offline. So we can build different prefabs ready to go. And we also then wanted to be able to control those shader constants at runtime. So things like changing the diffuse and the normal maps for a different ethnicity of character, but still keep the base form and topology of the mesh in one place. And we were really happy with the results we got. Even the same character with different top and bottom colors for the lighting algorithm would give a feel of a different character. You change their hair color, but not even the mesh, and it feels like a different character. Then when you combine that with the fact that they may be competing for a different country, they've got different kits, and it starts to fit into that believability phase of, that's my athlete, and you can tell who it is. So we needed to create the maximum amount of athletes from the minimum amount of models, basically. So here's our pipeline. We built it all within Max. So is that running? It's going to go in a second. So here we had custom rollouts. We had an SQL database that ran in the back end that tagged assets as they were created in component form. Is that going? And we also had we knew we had a preset number of rigs. We knew we had a preset number of heads. We knew the body type. So here we are, we're just selecting accessories to put on this guy. So they're just being pulled. So they're just going through the database, and then we load those in as basically a referenced mesh. It allows us to combine all of this. And then what we do is we save off the recipe for that. We don't save any other data out. We just save the recipe. And we leave that for our build process and our runtime tools to crunch and give us an optimal version. I mean, here we can see seams on the neck, but our build process will normalize all of those and weld the mesh as it gets produced. So it allowed us, you can see there's a little bit that says used 0 in the event and 11 times in total. It allowed us to keep the scope, work out how many kind of accessories and combinations of elements we were using per event. And we used it for clothes. I'm just going to go through that in a second. Yeah, well, I don't think we're actually going to put any on him. But we had the different sets. There was also, so we had base meshes for each of the bodies. So each event kept a consistent body type as well. So all the athletes share the same body type for that event. But that means there's no issues with scaling, foot sliding, you know, all of the other things you have when you normally try to vary a character. We kept the gameplay mechanics as consistent as possible. And the variation comes from the head and the kits that they're wearing. The good thing about it was, what we did was we empowered our artists to be able to make the characters. There's a whole suite of little tools, again, that we built on the side in Max for managing the database for athletes, you know, which country they're playing for, what type of athletes we have. Obviously, certain nations have a predominance in certain sports. You have certain countries that always have a certain ethnicity that is best. You know, the running events are usually dominated by, you know, African Americans, and then you have archery, which is usually Chinese, and you know, all of this was in the database. So we built the correct sets of characters so that when you play your campaign, it feels like you're actually partaking in the Olympic Games, and you've got the right competitors against you. Another tool that we created was a little NPC tool. It allowed us to place instances of NPCs within the world, like little mannequins. We can also do it by, with the TV style presentation, we had chapters. So everything is like a chapter on a DVD. You've got the intro chapter, you've got the game chapter, you know, you've got the results chapter. And we were allowed to move the NPCs around by chapter, so we're not just putting things bucket into the scene and wasting a lot of GPU or CPU time. We just placed them where we needed to composite the shot. And again, the artists are in control of that. Not as efficient as it should have been. It used to spit out a Lua script, and then we'd just compile that in. But it was certainly the most convenient way of getting the work done. So why would we build tools inside Max? That was the question. Well, it's easy to develop for. We wrote all of our tools as little C# apps were linked to them. We had our scripting, so we put all the menus and stuff so they can access all of this in one place. Character Creator is a combination of a whole set of pipelines, but under a UI that the artists, they just naturally know how to use. So content authoring pipeline is something our character team really knew well. It left me free and my programming team free to optimize the runtime side of it. So we could, without having the technology to encumber the guys, we allowed them to be building that content and have a fast way to do it, and we could spend our time concentrating on what was important. And it was there. You know, that was the bottom line. It was something that already existed, and we didn't have to go out of our way to write a new editor. We just extended something that gave them a good way of authoring. So the muscle system. So again, back to the TV style presentation thing. A lot of these guys do these events with their tops off, and people can see that. You know, you've got characters full screen. You want to see expression on their faces. You want to get that focus on there. And we also wanted to make improvements over previous titles. You know, we wanted to eliminate the crunching of joint areas, and basically we ended up building new rigs and a muscle system that overlaid it to fix these issues. And we also needed it to be fast, so that when we're in the actual game, we're doing as little as possible to get those characters on screen. So it's a lot of upfront work we were trying to do. So we actually got a couple of guys in to do what we called the kata video. So this is something the tech art guys spent a lot of time studying, looking at the muscle groups, trying to work out where we would build all of this rigging system so that we got the same kind of movement out of the characters as we get from this video. We also did it with cloth on as well, so we can see how the cloth falls, because we drove everything through the system I'm about to explain in a moment. And it was a reference tool. So while we were developing, the guys would constantly look at what we had in the game, what we had on screen, go back to this, where's it still failing, adjust that rig a little bit. So we created tension maps. Basically a normal map in the most extreme muscle pose you could get. So it's a guy that's really stressing himself out. And then we created mask textures using the RGBA channels to define certain muscle groups and areas on top of that mesh. And then at runtime, what we do is we were using those masks and compression of a simplified rig to work out, well, this bone group is compressing, this muscle group's compressing, and sort of blending the normal map in around that mask. So as the bicep contracts, you get, see a simple demo. So as the bicep contracts, we not only get the mesh deformation that you would normally expect, but we blend in the normals based upon that muscle as well. So we get more definition in there. And it will start at some point. Come on. Yeah, I think my laptop's having fun today.
Your laptop's experiencing jet lag.
Yes. It's a long way to Australia. Okay.
Come on, baby. You can do it.
Come on. Yeah, it's got the spinny icon.
There it goes.
Okay, so you can see the kind of muscle on his chest. That's the major groups we compressed it to: deltoids, you know, calf, biceps. So you can start to see the so you can see the little blends that start appearing in the chest, which is the normal maps. This is just straight to normal map. This was something that was in the control of the animators. They were able to add these as a layer on top of their animation if they really wanted to accentuate some of the character's motion or make him feel like he's stressed or winning. They had control over that. And we also did exactly the same thing for face. So we spent a little bit of time working out our own positioning for facial markers. We wanted to build a single set of rigs so that we could take one set of source facial motion capture and get it across all the different variances of heads. So here we have the guy. This is a very early test, but you can see he was based off the topology we were trying to capture for. But then the next step was to get that mapped onto another character who's got a really different style head and a different shader as well. But you can see the motion's still the same. We don't get any... we don't get what you usually see, you know, the Joker smile kind of expressions, or, you know, the eyes going rolling back. And when it's used not to the excess, when it's used in moderation, it starts to pass for that believable feel. And then we'll switch to another one which has got a completely different guy driven from the same sets of animation, all through our same pipeline. And that's going to be shown in a second. So here we have just a quick look at some of the tools we used for the facial stuff. So we spent a lot of time procedurally or on the fly creating rigs for characters. So the artists were allowed to create models, and then based off the bone structure we could auto skin and auto rig a character, which was really useful for them to get new content in. So here we go. We're going to actually create a rig. I'll keep talking because it may take a while. I don't think I edited this one to slow it down, but you can see it sort of generates it. It's just a script that runs, generates a rig, so the animators get a bit more control. We also then took the mocap data in and then allowed them to play with that a little bit more. So we're going to load an animation up as well after we set the normal maps. So that defines the masks that we're going to use and the tension maps that are going to be in there for the detail. Then you'll get an animation on it, which is the ROM animation in a moment that we just saw from the mocap. And a scrub through. So what you're going to see is you can see particularly around the nose, around the mouth, corners of the eyes, that same technology we use for the bodies, for blending in the normal maps only at the points where the animation, you know, that's where we blend it in. Here we have a debug shader so we can see the maps and their intensities as they start to blend in. The reason we did it with the maps is that to create more variation between the athletes, we can change that base variation of how much the normal maps bleed through. So you can have a guy who is generally more ripped than somebody else because his base offset for the normal maps bleeding through is at a higher level. And then on to Motion Builder, which was the final part of our process. So we were lucky enough to have probably one of the biggest motion capture studios in the Southern Hemisphere. We had a very fast pipeline of taking our mocap data and doing cleanup on it. And we also created volumes for pretty much every single event so we could capture it all in context. So we built a really tall volume for trampoline. We built one outside for, you know, beach volleyball, just to get the athletes in their environment to make it a little bit better. And what we did was, generally that went straight through to FBX, straight through to Motion Builder, but we used FBX as an interchange format. So obviously you take raw mocap straight into Motion Builder and you start to do your cleanup and tidy up, but we're not going to have any of this great muscle system that we've built on top of it, and that's something that the animators really want to play with. So we can see, obviously, the deformations in there on the joints. It's a simplistic skeleton. So we import and build our muscle system back on top within Motion Builder, which kind of automagically creates it all for us. And then when we're using the muscle deformation system, you see we kind of get that different movement. The whole normal map blending system still works on there as well, so that we get a better visual result. So here we're going to just plot some raw mocap onto the character, and we're just going to walk him up and down a couple of times, I think.
Apparently they love you over there.
And then we'll see it again with the character. So What we have on top of this then is we have the extra rollouts where the animators can then start playing with the tension maps per muscle group. And you saw a little bit of it in the trailer video before, so that they can actually accentuate, muscles at any point they want to. So the guy, pumping his arms, you can see that definition in there. And that's it. So we've pretty much used every Autodesk product, I think, somewhere in their pipeline. And I think the biggest takeaway from it was it's there, and you can extend it, and you can use it, and you can get some really good results if it fits your pipeline. If anybody's got any questions, you can feel free to email me.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Excellent job.